But anyway, I'm glad we were able to touch on that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just tuning in, thank you for listening to the What's on Sports podcast. Every once in a while, I like to bring this next gentleman on and help me out and learn some things. I have mentioned a few times on this show. A few weeks ago, Michael started showing me a little bit more about fantasy. I'm more of a gambler. I'm less of a fantasy guy. My second weekend of playing, I won $580. My third weekend of playing, I won $640. My fourth weekend of playing, I ignored what Michael told me and I lost money. So I'm going to bring Michael on as much as I can to learn as much as I can. Hopefully the listeners can learn as well. His name is Michael Schussler. They call him the Charm City Cash Cow. And today Michael wants to tell us about 5 fantasy white dwarf stars for week 14. Now, before we go any further, Michael, what in the heck's a white dwarf star?
Well, John, like you said, this is an educational program, and it is not an offensive term. I don't mind teaching everyone out there. I don't mind teaching you a few things. So a white
dwarf, you know, somebody out there right now is going, why's it got to be white?
Well, it has to be white because of the color of the fire in a white dwarf star. Now, a white dwarf are stars that are near the end of their life cycle. Okay, these are very dense and very hot, which is why they burn white. They're also very small. They're very difficult to see. Okay, much like these players who I'm about to name, who don't make a lot of noise, but they can burn super hot when they need to, especially here, in the fantasy playoffs. So
these guys are just going to explode really quick like a star and then maybe disappear.
That's exactly right. Or it's not, or just they've been there. Okay, they've been there, but we don't always see them, even though they're burning hot. Okay?
All right.
So, our first white dwarf.
Number
one is Mike Davis, running back for the Carolina Panthers.
Nice.
Now, he doesn't get a lot of attention because
zero.
Fantasy darling, Run CMC, Dippin' Dot, C-Mac, Christian McCaffrey. I love him. I love his nicknames. Okay? He gets so much attention, deservingly, rightfully so. But Christian McCaffrey missed Thursday's practice yesterday after being limited on Wednesday, and he's currently rehabbing, according to head coach Matt Rule. So the star running back, he's dealing with a new thigh injury and his lingering AC joint sprain. He's got a bunch going on, and he's just doubtful to play this week. So Mike Davis is in line to remain as the top running back for the Panthers. Now, he's only 6,400 in DraftKings. We haven't really seen Mike Davis pay off since his super hot start to the season in the early weeks when Christian McCaffrey first went down. But he had 18 touches last week, 21 touches 2 weeks ago, and he should be relatively well rested coming off of a bye week. And he's facing a Broncos defense that gave up, 230 rushing yards to the Saints 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
120 of that was just from Latavius Murray. And it's a shame that fantasy managers won't have McCaffrey as we head into the fantasy playoffs. But I do like Mike Davis to put up good numbers this week against the Broncos. He's going to see a lot of volume. And he, like I said, he hasn't been great, but I think he returns to his early season form this week against the Broncos. So he's my first.
I'm not a daily fantasy guy, but I've played in leagues forever. I know that most people who spend that high draft pick on a guy like McCaffrey will usually handcuff a guy like Davis so that just in case he goes down, you've got the guy. For those of the people that did out there, I think it was a wise move. Davis has had a really strong year. I mean, for a guy that no one knew about, I think he's played really well. He's obviously not on the level of a McCaffrey. I think he's played well, but he could save somebody this weekend. Like he could absolutely save you this weekend if you got him. Who's the next guy you got on your list of your white dwarf stars?
My next white dwarf is Giovanni Bernard. Now, this is another backup. Okay. So we hear about him occasionally. He's the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, for those of you who don't know. And since taking over the lead running back duties in Joe Mixon's absence, who is their workhorse lead back, normally sees 25 carries a game. We love Joe Mixon when he's healthy. But since taking over for Joe Mixon, Bernard has been disappointing, okay, to say the least. But his lack of production isn't necessarily unexpected. Recently, he's faced really tough defenses in the Miami Dolphins, the Washington football team, and your Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, so his poor numbers have also lowered his DFS value quite a bit. He's only $5,000 this week on DraftKings. And it's a much softer matchup going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who we just saw give up 294 rushing yards to the Ravens on Tuesday night. Yeah, they did. And this should be a get right game for Giovanni. And his price is so cheap that it's as cheap as it's been since week 7. Okay, and he hasn't scored in 4 straight weeks. I think he corrects that this Sunday against the Cowboys. They can't stop anyone on the ground. Giovanni Bernard, burning hot.
Nice.
As we get into the fantasy play.
Playing that counter trend. So Giovanni's not been playing well. This is the week he gets right. Coming into week 14, could save somebody, could make somebody a lot of money in daily fantasy. Who's your number 3 guy?
Number 3 is the last running back on this list, and that's a guy who I talk about all the time, but he's still unnoticed, and that's Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. Okay, another quiet, under the radar guy that only gets, 20 plus touches a game, every game. He had another 23 touches last week, his first game being back from IR with a knee injury. But clearly that hasn't factored into Brian Flores' usage of Gaskins, because he's just so vital to the Miami offense in moving the ball down the field, on the ground and through the air. He had over 50 yards receiving last week to set up a nice touchdown. Now, they play Kansas City this week. All right, and we know that the Dolphins are going to want to run the ball as often as possible, drain that clock, keep Mahomes and company off the field as much as they can. Okay, Gaskins, somehow, he's only 5,600 in DraftKings. But for that price, with that volume of a guaranteed 20-plus touches, that's must-start territory for me. Love Myles Gaskins. I have for the past all year. He still doesn't get any attention. Come on, Myles. This week.
We had some in the chat room last week saying that you're the only one who's been talking about Gaskins of all the fantasy guys, talking about Gaskins and talking about Cam Akers, and you've been hitting like 1,000 on both of those guys.
Almost
just
like
really,
I know
really good. Yeah, those two and the kid from the Giants, you've been all over all 3 of those guys for a while now. They're great calls. Let's talk about you said that's the end of the running backs.
Right.
So what do you got for your last 2 guys here?
So my last 2 guys, okay, now this is a guy who is a tight end for the Washington football team, Logan Thomas, who we saw tie up the game in the 4th quarter against the Steelers last week with that 15-yard touchdown. Beautiful pass, beautiful catch. Now, a lot of people don't know who Logan Thomas is, which is why he fits into this category.
I'll be honest, I was watching the game literally thinking, who
is this guy? Well, John, he was the starting quarterback for Virginia Tech in the early 2010s.
Wow.
And he was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals as a quarterback in the 4th round of the 2014 draft. And he spent some time as a reserve QB for the Dolphins and the Giants before switching to tight end with the Lions in 2016. Yep. Fast forward to now, he's tight end number 8 on the season in total fantasy points. He has back-to-back games with a touchdown, and he hasn't seen fewer than 4 targets in any game this season. I know that's not a lot, but it's a tight end position that's extremely thin. Okay. And he set a career high in receptions last week with 9 on 9 targets. And Alex Smith is clearly comfortable looking his way, not only in the red zone, but all over the field. All over the field. He's the 23rd cheapest tight end in DraftKings at just $3,300. And he's probably priced so low because he faces the 49ers, who are top 3 versus opposing tight ends. But again, the volume, the attention from Alex Smith that he's getting for that price, it's a great value. Another low burning but super hot white dwarf star in Logan Thomas.
You know, as someone that's followed Alex Smith's career, Alex Smith has always been the guy who's gone to his tight end. So it doesn't shock me at all to know that this kid has come on in the last few games as Alex has taken over and really become the guy, become more comfortable. Yeah, that's just his MO. He loves to work the middle of the field. He loves the little checkdowns. He loves to work the seams. And that kid last week, I saw him play. He's quite athletic for a guy that was a quarterback out of Virginia Tech. I mean, he's really, really an athletic guy. So we got one guy left on your list, one final white dwarf star that's burning super hot for everybody's fantasy football weekend. Who is this last guy?
This is another guy that I talked about last show. Kiki Cutie. Okay.
Mm.
Kiki, do you love me? Are you riding? I mean, that's what fantasy managers will be asking
Can you
this
sing
weekend.
it? Can you sing it? Come on.
I just did. You can look it
No,
up.
no,
You know
everybody
it.
in the chat
You
room's
know
like,
it.
can you sing it?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
sing it? Do it.
Well, listen to this.
Do you love? Come on, do it.
There it is. You got it. You got it.
Yeah, you suck. I
He was
thought you were going to sing it.
23% owned on Wednesday when I brought him up.
Ooh.
Okay. Now he's 29% owned. But I think I'll take credit for like that 5%. Yeah, that's probably accurate.
That's actually 6.
You're right. You're right. That's 6%.
I'm glad you're not my math tutor.
Yeah.
I'm glad you just helped me with fantasy football, not my trigonometry.
But look, 29% is not enough. Okay, because he's going to be a league winner. All right, this is another guy many people just never think of as fantasy relevant because he's been buried on the Houston Texans depth chart for the last 3 years. But he's finally getting an opportunity with DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills no longer in the picture in Houston. All right, and I said this before. We know Deshaun Watson wants to throw the ball over 300 yards in 3 straight games. It's a tough matchup against the Chicago Bears this week, but those targets have got to go somewhere. Again, he's just $5,000 in DraftKings. He's got an excellent chance to return 3 times value this weekend and get at least 15 fantasy points, putting him right in line with my price to profit algorithm. Everything's lining up for Kiki to love us and to get us points in the fantasy playoffs. Love Kiki going forward.
His name is Michael Schussler. He's one of the premier fantasy experts in America today. I think if he doesn't sing, I don't know if I should ever bring him back on the show, but he has made me some money, so I think you get a pass.
You don't want to hear
time.
that. That's the thing. You don't want to hear me sing, or else you wouldn't bring me back. There would be no reason to.
That would be it, huh?
Yeah.
That would ruin it. Michael, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for giving us information that always makes us a ton of cash.